There it is.
Hi, I'm Jackie with Military Saves. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our Save to Retire Midday Money Chat. We're in week 3 of Military Saves Month, and I am pleased to welcome 3 different guests today. So before I get into their wonderful backgrounds and why they're going to be amazing experts to discuss retirement, I first want to remind you of 2 things. 1, please drop your favorite takeaway in the comments below for a chance to win a $50 gift card of your choice from our friends at Military Families Magazine. And 2, be sure to enter our $500 I'm Saving For sweepstakes. All you have to do is take our Military Saves pledge, join our Facebook group, and tell us in the group what you're saving for using the hashtag I'm Saving For sweepstakes. Good luck. All right, so without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our guests today. We're going to start with Doug. Doug Nordman served in the Navy for 20 years and retired at the age of 41, which is younger than I am right now. I'm still blown away by this. So Doug and his spouse, a retired Navy reservist, reached financial independence in 1999 on a high savings rate. Doug is a published author and the founder of themilitaryguide.com. Doug donates all his writing and speaking revenue to military-friendly charities and is living the dream in Hawaii with his family, where he spends a great deal of time surfing. Doug, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Jackie. It's good to do another one of these. I enjoy them.
Well, we are so excited to have you share your retirement dream with us and give us tips on how to make it a reality. All right, next I'm going to introduce Susan Weinstock. Susan is the Vice President of Financial Resilience Programming with AARP. She is responsible for the overall strategic direction of AARP programs and education competencies to improve the financial security of persons age 50 and older. In this position, Susan leads AARP's enterprise-wide efforts on work and jobs. Prior to this, Susan worked for the U.S. Department of the Treasury, the Pew Charitable Trust Consumer Banking Project, and the Consumer Federation of America, which happens to be our parent nonprofit organization. Yay! All right, Susan's got more than 20 years of advocacy, communications, research, grassroots, and legislative experience working to protect consumers. Susan, thank you so much for coming back and joining us today.
Be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Wonderful. All right, and last but not least, we have Arlene Ferris-Waks. She has a wide-ranging experience in the securities industry. She is currently the Director of Complaints and Investor Outreach with the New Jersey Bureau of Securities. Previously, Arlene worked with both the New York Stock Exchange and American Express as a Senior Compliance Officer and as an investment advisor and registered representative. In 2015, Arlene received the New Jersey Attorney General's Award for Excellence in Public Outreach. So Arlene, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
So what a team of experts. I'm ready to just jump right into it because I know you've got lots of wealth of information to share with us today. So let's go ahead and kick off. The military is a little bit different when it comes to retirement. You can be a retiree at age 38. Not everyone does what Doug did. A lot of them end up rejoining the workforce as a civilian. Military spouses often enter the workforce, or sometimes they become entrepreneurs and start their own companies. So it's a very unique situation we've got in the military. Now at Military Saves, we always stress the importance of contributing to your TSP accounts for retirement. And we will talk about some particulars with retirement accounts. But before we do that, I want to talk about behaviors. So I'm going to start with you, Susan. Can you please tell me the importance of saving for retirement sooner rather than later? And have you had experience with those who wish they had saved more or started saving sooner?
Sure. Yeah. I love the term, the miracle of compound interest, because to me, it is a miracle, and it's a miracle that everyone can and should take advantage of. And before this, I just pulled up an example so I could just sort of detail kind of how this miracle works. So, and this is from, I want to give credit to Jean Chatsky from Her Money. She's also an AARP ambassador. And this is from her website. So if you're a 25-year-old and you started investing $200 a month, assuming a 6% return, by the time you turn 65, you'd have a nest egg of $393,700. But if they waited 30 till 35 to start saving, so 10 years later, and still started saving $200 a month, even at the same rate of return, they'd end up with almost half of that at $201,000 by the age of 65. So starting young is huge. It's really, really, really important. We hear all the time from people who say, I just wish I had started sooner. When you're 25 and you get into the workforce, your first job, and you're thinking about, oh my gosh, I got student loans, I got a car payment, I got this, I got that. As much as you can, just try and stash away some money. It doesn't matter how much, but if you get into that habit and make it automatic, get it through payroll deduction, put it into that TSP, set it and forget it. Then it's there, it's building, and you're going to take advantage of that miracle. And you will be so happy when you turn 65 and you think, gosh, I was a smart 25-year-old. So I highly recommend taking advantage of that miracle.
That's excellent. And the numbers don't lie. So I know a lot of times people think retirement is something to worry about in the future, but honestly, the more you take care of yourself today and start putting aside, set it and forget it, you probably won't even miss it. Right. You'll be able to retire sooner with more money and just a lot more comfort and stability. So Thank you for that.
Sure.
So yeah, retirement is a long game. It's about putting off the wants of today for a more financially sound tomorrow. And I'll admit, it's not like the most exciting topic. A lot of people hear retirement, they think, and they think, oh, that's so far off. I don't have to worry about that now. Unless someone is living the dream and doing it at a young age. And for that, I'm going to refer to Doug, because here you are calling in from Hawaii. You retired at age 41. Please tell us how you did this. And now you're living in paradise, you're surfing, you're writing, you're a philanthropist. So tell us a little bit about how you accomplished this goal.
Well, everybody wishes they'd started saving when they were teenagers, especially as you get older and that mythical age 65 approaches. And yes, the best time to save was 20, 30, 40 years ago, but the next best time to start doing that is today. And for my spouse and myself, it was a high savings rate. We started saving as soon as we started getting military paychecks, and just a little bit. Today, I'd advise everybody in the blended retirement system or with a conventional 401k that's got a match to invest at least for the match, at least get that free money out of the blended retirement system and the TSP, at least get the 401k matching, and then work on other debts and building up your emergency fund and all the basics. We managed to keep that high savings rate through my entire time on active duty. And that just augments the pension. We're spending all the pension money, and we're also spending from our investments and our thrift savings plan account. And we managed to reach that financial independence in late 1999. We joke that that was when everybody else reached financial independence for about 15 minutes, and ours was the same way. However, over the last, it's been almost 20 years now, over those 2 decades, our wealth has grown faster than inflation. And we talk about compounding, we talk about starting early, and we talk about only having to save a little bit. But once you do reach financial independence, your wealth will grow fast enough that you will probably outrun your spending. Your spending will stay flat, maybe grow a little with inflation, while your net worth goes a lot faster. And so you're talking about lifetime security, even without a military pension. And again, it's easy to do it with a military pension, but that's only 1 out of every 6 people. And all my readers, I talk about making sure that they get ready for leaving the military anytime. At the end of that obligation, you might be a veteran without being a retiree.
Excellent information. That's wonderful. I love that you're able to just live off of all of that and the interest and the earnings
Yep.
and that you're also, I think something that's really important is that you are providing this information to the military community. You guys should definitely check out themilitaryguide.com to follow Doug and get in touch with that specific information geared towards the military, especially if you are looking to transition out. So Arlene, when it comes to investing for the future, as we've just talked about, it's a combination of both healthy behaviors and getting the right accounts and kind of having a nice aggregate and diversified portfolio. Unfortunately, though, the military community does get targeted by investment scams, and I'd like for you to share some examples and how to prevent that. What would you advise to our military community?
Well, thank you for that question. A few things. Let me start with the initial check before you invest. In terms of working with a financial professional, you should always find out if somebody is registered to do business. And one of the ways to do that is to check with your state securities regulator, in this case in the New Jersey, with the New Jersey Bureau of Securities. It's a free check to find out if the person in the firm is licensed to do business. Never be rushed, always investigate. Don't sign anything before you understand it. Those are some of the things that I like to tell people. And there are no guarantees in investing. And also that there is no such thing as no risk, because each year we receive a variety of complaints on people that have been defrauded. And there are a number of scams that military people are susceptible to. One is multi-level marketing schemes. This is a type of pyramid marketing that's really oriented many times towards moms and military wives, in which investors, people buy marketing materials in bulk and then have to sell it out to their customers and usually end up losing money. So that's one thing to be really careful about. The other types of investment schemes that people need to be aware of are pump and dump schemes. A lot of times people start to, over the internet, spread rumors about low priced stocks. And as they're spreading these rumors and the stock price is moving, they end up selling out their stock, and many people are left holding a stock that's worthless, because oftentimes the rumors are just that, rumors. There's no substance behind them. So that's one way. That boiler rooms is another. Boiler rooms, or maybe you've heard of bucket shops, where illegal brokerages are set up. They don't execute people's orders, and by the time people realize that they're fraudulent, they've closed shop, and they're nobody and nowhere to be found. So that's another thing to be aware of, and why it's so important to check and see if the entity, as well as the person you're working with, is registered. They're more likely to do legitimate business. And the last one before I'd like to mention are reload scams. Often people get involved in a fraud, and reload scams are when someone keeps saying to you, well, you know, if you give me more money, we'll keep trying to make this up, or we'll give you another investment. And these are times that should be where you're aware there are possible red flags that there's something wrong with your investment. And each year we get a variety of complaints related to people being defrauded. So stay safe out there, check before you invest.
Hey, Jackie, can I just add one thing to what Arlene was saying? Might be a good resource for folks is AARP has developed a tool called Interview and Advisor. So go search on AARP Interview and Advisor. There's a checklist that you can look at and see if the advisor that you're looking at is appropriate for the needs that you have. It's a free tool. You don't need to do anything. It's just a checklist. You can even print out the information, and you can do it, you know, on paper if you want. But it's we worked really hard to develop this. Unfortunately, it's not optimized for mobile yet. That's coming very soon. But you can certainly use it on your laptop or on your desktop, and it will help you figure out if the person that you're looking at is the right advisor for you.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Arlene. I can attest I was an Army wife for 7.5 years, and I was invited to so many coffee dates or wine nights. And then it turns out someone was trying to sell a product to me, whether it was makeup or kitchen products, or, you know, and I would watch the spouses just bounce from carrying inventory from one brand to the next, thinking, well, if the nails didn't work, maybe the leggings will work. And they unfortunately never were at the top of the company making all that money and buying into that dream that they were sold. So I guess what you're saying as well too is there's no such thing as, like, maybe not no such thing, but be wary of get rich quick schemes.
Yes, exactly. And just to add to, in terms of the New Jersey Bureau of Securities, on our website, njsecurities.gov, if you go to our military page, we have a variety of literature sources that would be helpful to investors to take a look at. So I'd advise people to take a look at our website.
Great, thank you so much. And we can always drop links below in the comments as well. So for any of you tuning in who would like to check out some of these resources, we'll make sure that that's available for you. So let's go ahead and talk about retirement accounts. I can tell you as a military spouse, I stopped working for a while when we moved to Germany, and I no longer had a retirement account through an employer because I had no employer. However, I set up my own mutual funds, IRA, certificate of deposits, and a lot of my friends who were spouses were shocked because they didn't realize you can start your own accounts. It's not always reliant on having an employer. So I want to talk about the importance of military spouses as well, understanding that they can open up their own retirement accounts and don't just need to be reliant on their working active duty spouse. So I'm going to go to you now, Susan. Can you go ahead and speak to the importance of each adult in the house having their own retirement savings? And then what preparedness reasons can you share might necessitate having both individual and family retirement goals?
Sure. Yeah. I think your point about diversifying your retirement portfolios is spot on. Absolutely. And if both adults have access to the TSP or a 401k, as Doug was saying, take advantage of it. Don't leave money on the table. Get that, put in as much as you can to get that match. It's painful to me when I hear about people who don't even put in enough to get the match. It's money that's sitting there waiting for you. Just take it. All you have to do is put in the money to get the match. But the TSP offers lots of advantages. My husband is actually a federal government employee. We have a TSP account. Well, he does. And it has the payroll deduction, the diverse pre-tax and after-tax investment options, contributions from your service and beneficiary participant accounts. And then there's, of course, a variety of withdrawal options. Military families have life insurance to cover now until they retire. And then after retirement, they get their pension, and they can start to draw from their retirement accounts. So you really need to think through what lies ahead, and you need to think about each person has different investment and contribution opportunities. So maximize all of the tax-free and matching that you can, and don't leave money on the table. So here's an example that I pulled. If you're a soldier working towards military retirement and you're married to a teacher that has a 403B with a match from the school district, then that's a great way that you're both saving and you're both working towards your retirement. Now, the average age difference in marriage is a little over 2 years, which means that there could be different retirement dates. So you need to have your savings try to align with when you want to retire. And when families, mostly retire together, it doesn't always, unfortunately, sometimes there's divorce or there's death. So having that separate account makes you prepared to be able to navigate going forward if something were to happen. And most families, as I said, do retire together, and those individual retirement accounts create a more diversified portfolio, which is incredibly important. And of course, there's a number of veteran-specific income sources that you need to think about. Individual retirement savings help maximize these, especially when savings may be a factor in a benefit. These include military retirement pay, VA disability compensation, and then the veteran pension for low-income veterans. So all of these things put together really make for a robust and strong retirement, but you have to make sure you put all the pieces in place.
Excellent. And as they've always said, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So I think that's great that each individual has their own retirement savings, and they're also diversified portfolios. I'm fascinated by what you said about the age difference, because that's true. If someone's got 5 or even 10-year difference, someone might continue working for a while, and that could be advantageous. But if you are looking to retire at the same time, then go ahead and make sure you're making the max amount of contributions, you're getting matching where you can, and you're talking with your spouse about retirement goals so that you two can be on the same page. So great. Thank you, Susan. So Doug, I want to know, since you communicate, I want to know, how are you in Hawaii right now? No, my real question is, since you work so closely with the military, what would you say, what question or questions are you most asked regarding retirement? And what would your advice be to our service members and their families who want to retire comfortably or even early like you did?
The most popular question I get by far is, how does the reserve pension work? If you leave active duty and go into reserves or the National Guard, you can still serve 20 good years in those services, and you can earn a pension. It just starts paying out at around age 60. It could pay out a little earlier if you've had multiple mobilizations for certain situations, but People might not necessarily appreciate that they could leave active duty and still serve in the reserves or the Guard. Pension at age 60, it's a good deal, but it's very confusing. I would say it's probably the world's most complicated pension system because the US military tries to keep that pension growing with inflation. You could hypothetically, like we mentioned earlier, you could retire from the military at age 38. I mean, if your pension doesn't start until age 60, the initial reaction is, oh, well, that's just going to be very little money. It's 2 decades away. Inflation will chew it apart. There won't be anything for me when I'm that old. The reality is that the reserve pension is adjusted every year with military pay raises, just as though that reservist waiting for age 60 was still on active duty. And so the pension keeps up with inflation. And after they start drawing it at age 60, it's continued to adjust for inflation. It's a great deal for somebody who doesn't want to stay on active duty for a full 20 years. I tell readers that if you're feeling challenged and fulfilled, take it one obligation at a time. But when the fun stops, and there's no doubt, then it's time to consider going into the reserves or the Guard so that you can get that possibly pension at age 60. And that is a very complicated formula. I get the question all the time. I've got the information on the website. All the services have their retirement calculators, and I'm there to help with that. The other question about what advice would I give to anybody at any point in their career, and that is when you're finally getting to the point where you feel like you need to start saving for retirement, you're tired of living with debt, you've had enough, you've hit rock bottom with whatever means that now you're ready to start saving for financial independence. The very first step is to track your spending. And this is like a New Year's resolution, but you're going to make it easy on yourself. You're not going to go on a spending diet. You're not going to try to cut back all of your spending all of a sudden at once. You're just going to track your spending for a few months. And at the end of tracking where every penny goes for the few months, at the end of that time, you'll figure out what's wasted. It's up to you what's wasted. And you'll find the waste in your spending after you've been tracking it for a few months. And at that point, you can begin cutting out the stuff that you don't care about. If it's wasted spending, you're going to cut it and you're going to put that towards saving for retirement. If it's valuable spending, well, you're willing to work as many more years as it takes for that spending to be of value to you. But again, if you're tracking it now, you can look at it and you can figure out exactly what you're willing to work for until you're 65 or older, and what you don't want to work for and what you want to put for retirement. And maybe you reach financial independence in your 50s or even 40s.
Wow, that's a really good application of just reviewing your finances, taking an honest snapshot. And
It all starts with that tracking.
Right.
Yep.
I like that very much. We at Military Saves, we also have a tool like that, a spending and savings tool, which we can link as well
Right.
for those of you watching, just to kind of keep a snapshot. And it is a little more long-term, as you said, a couple of months, make sure you really know, how often you're eating out, for example, or how many vampire costs are getting sucked from your account for subscription services you don't use. And so it's good to be aware. And something we actually hadn't mentioned yet is that people are living longer. When you used to retire,
I hope so.
Yeah. At a certain age, maybe you would have another 5 or 10 years left, but I mean, we're living well into our 80s and 90s. So that's something to keep in mind as well when you're calculating how long are you going to need this income. So that's really important.
I really enjoy the websites that show what you're going to look like when you're 82 years old based on a picture that you have today. And that makes you appreciate what the future you is going to wish today's you had done to save for retirement.
Perfect. I love that. Do something today that future you will thank you for. And I keep that, keeping your eyes on the prize. Like maybe you want something now, but you really won't want it maybe in another year or so, or in another week.
Yeah.
If you put that money aside for retirement, like you said, if you decide that's what's more important, then yes, absolutely. And you probably look a lot better when you're older too, if you've retired comfortably, a lot less stress. All right. Well, Arlene, I'd like to talk to you again for a moment, please. So we know that various types of accounts do yield certain amounts of interest. I know Doug was talking about he had high yielding accounts with savings. So we've got investments. Investments are a little riskier, but you always hear about that. With the big reward comes a lot of risk. And some people aren't always in the position to assume that risk. So I would actually be interested in what sort of advice do you have for our military savers who are looking at adding investments into their retirement plan, as well as other, I guess, more certain accounts where you know how much you're going to get as a rate of return.
Well, it's a really good question again. I think it's a
So what would you
combination.
advise about investing?
I think it's a combination of things. One is you're going to be looking at how long you're looking to invest. So, and what your goal is, obviously, and the amount of risk you need to take or is willing to take. What's going to keep you up at night? I kind of like to talk to people generally about the plain vanilla investing. And that's really maybe looking at mutual funds, index funds, some stocks, CDs, that sort of thing, where you can, and sometimes some bonds, depending on where interest rates are going, where you can kind of diversify your portfolio and feel comfortable enough to sleep at night. You know, those of us that have a long range view may want to take a little bit more risk, but generally I don't encourage people to either buy low price stocks or, you know, virtual currency or other things that may be far riskier. I think that if you want a little so-called spice, because I find that a lot of investors are interested in various types of investments, make it a very small component of your portfolio. But generally, I think spreading out your investments among those types of classes and buying high quality stocks and bonds and mutual funds should be able to help you get to your goal.
Great. And would you recommend for younger savers, say they are starting at 20, 25, that they do invest in a riskier stock package just because they've got a longer period of time? Or would you advise against that?
I think it depends. I mean, I always think that in terms of having a stock portfolio, it's nice to have, you know, those companies that have been long established that you kind of know. And then for maybe younger investors, they're taking a look at some of the startup companies. Some of them are pretty well established that, you know, they may want to take a position in. And even those other startups that if they foresee have a pretty good future possibly ahead of them, given the business that they're in, I wouldn't stop them. I would just caution about putting an overall amount of their assets either into any one stock or any one bond, as well as to anything significantly risky. A little, like I said, just a little spice if somebody feels they need that. That's fine. But if you're the kind of person that wants a steady return, you kind of want to let things, you know, buy and hold. It's worked for many famous investors. That's really a good way to be able to, you know, reach your investment goals.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I know that when I started investing as a 20-something-year-old with an online site, didn't know what I was doing, didn't check it either. I just put money in and walked away. And then I came back a year later and was like, I lost it. And someone said to me at the time, you're supposed to keep an eye on it and pay attention to market trends, and you might want to move money around. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe for stocks, I just, you know, left it alone. So I guess be aware of what you're investing in. And some things are more steady, like a CD, you can just put it in there and not even look at it again, you know. So I appreciate your insight to this. Thank you so much.
Oh,
So
no
I
problem,
want to know.
Jackie. Oh, excuse me if I could
Sorry,
just
go
say
ahead.
something, if you don't mind. I
Sure.
think that when I say like sort of let it grow, you might want to decide to look at it quarterly. You know, it's just not something you want to look at every day, but you can try to decide if you need to, you know, reapportion your portfolio at any point in time or talk to your financial consultant.
And target date funds are really helpful with that, where just, you know, you look at what year you think you want to retire and base your, you put your money into those funds. They'll balance it for you. You don't have to be the stock expert. They'll figure that out. They're the professionals. You just put your money in there, and then it's not something that you have to, you know, worry about nearly as much. You know, there's a date that you want to retire, and you're going to put your money towards that for that date.
Excellent. And I know that you specifically, Susan, work with people age 50 and up. Are you seeing people retire earlier, later now? Is there any sort of trend there that you've noticed?
You know, with the pandemic, it's hard to say. If you asked me about a year and a half ago, I would have said I was hearing about people unretiring. The job market was going gangbusters, and we would hear all the time about people who were like, you know what, I retired, it's bored to tears. Had nothing to do. I just needed something. So I went back and I did something either in my field, or I tried something completely different, or I became an entrepreneur. We know particularly communities of color, Black communities and Hispanic communities over-index for their interest in entrepreneurship, and they'll often do that older. And despite this myth that all entrepreneurs are these kids in hoodies, they're not. The successful entrepreneurs in this country are 50 and over. And that's because they have networks, they have assets, they know how to work in a business. And so they take that acumen and those networks and they put it towards their own business, and they can really make a go of it. Now, the pandemic has obviously upended so much of that. And I so hope that things go back to the way they were, because people were able to live and work so much longer and enjoy it. And do work that they really felt passionate about. We did survey research that showed, yes, the number one reason for people working longer is the money, but you know what number two was? I like my job. It's fantastic. I love to hear that. I think that's awesome. I mean, everybody should have that kind of job that they feel so good about. So, we'll see what happens when the pandemic comes back. We know that the folks that have been out of work the longest, the long-term unemployed, about half of those who are over 50 and are long-term unemployed, meaning they've been out of work for 6 months or longer. And it's hard to get back in, no question about it. So hopefully the economy will come back and folks will have lots of opportunities to join back in.
Wonderful. That's a fun statistic, though, that, at 50 up, you can start the next chapter of your life and start your own company. And I see that so much in the military community. There's so many veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs. And it's because of the lifestyle we move around. So it's easier to just take something with us if possible. And also the veterans are just so trained. They've got this tenacity, this drive, this motivation, and oftentimes go into the civilian world and think this isn't for me, but I've got this wealth of information and I've got something to share.
And they have discipline. They have really good discipline, and that's important too.
Yes. Great. They do, because you have to show up. I mean, it's your company. If you don't, who's doing it for you? And that also leads to, and when you are doing that, make sure you pay yourself first. And I know that that's a key to retirement. It's not something that happens overnight. It is a long game. Maybe Doug's game wasn't super long.
It's a longevity skill. That's a skill. Yes.
No, it's truly, truly impressive. So I've got a question for all three of you now. So knowing what you know now, what would you personally have done differently in your youth when it comes to retirement? I'm going to start with you, Arlene.
Well, I guess I would have started investing sooner. I think, I did take advantage of certain types of 401ks that were available to me, but I think I would have thought a little bit more about my long range goals and my short term goals. And even now, as I'm working, I'm thinking about, what does retirement look like? Because again, it's been discussed previously, retirement is looking a lot different maybe than years ago when our parents or our grandparents retired. People are not just, taking off and sitting at home on the porch. People are doing a variety of sports and different types of activities. And just really thinking about, well, what does that look like? How can I finance that? What are my costs and my expenses going to be? So I think I would have started thinking about that a little bit sooner and just working on putting together that information. And also looking on, it's not a very sexy thing, but to look at retirement calculators just to see, well, at this age, what kind of money would I require? To have to be able to retire at a certain point in time. And I think that's really insightful.
Arlene, you bring up such a great point, because I think it's not just about a date, an end date of when you want to retire. It is an evaluation of your lifestyle. Do you want to travel? Do you want to own multiple properties where maybe you're, summering in the north and wintering in the south? And I think that's really important to take into consideration. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Doug, I'll go ahead and ask you, what would you have done differently in your youth, knowing what you know now?
I would have gone for passively managed index funds, probably high allocation to stocks, and with a low expense ratio. We were very good at a high savings rate. And luckily, it turns out that a high savings rate will overcome a lot of classic investing mistakes. And today, with expense ratios being so widely available at almost zero, and with so many different classes of assets, it's much easier than it's ever been before to come up with an asset allocation and to do low expense ratios, because that's really all you have under your control: your savings rate, your asset allocation, and minimizing the expenses that go into that. Again, the high savings rate will overcome a lot of mistakes, thank goodness, but I would have reached financial independence a lot earlier, maybe had a little more discretionary spending income if we had not been making all those classic mistakes of the 80s and 90s.
Okay, thank you. That's very informative and specific. I appreciate that too.
I've had a lot of time to think about that.
Well, while surfing.
That's right.
And Susan, how about you? What would you do differently in your youth, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I think, there's been this, classic shift of risk on retirement planning from, the employer who you used to get a pension and you didn't have to worry so much. And now, if you're supposed to be an expert in these things, and, I remember in my first job and they handed me all these papers and I'm like, I'm 22 years old. Like, what do I care about any of this? And I just, so I didn't care. I was so young. It didn't even like, I was annoyed that I even had to deal with this, which is like, looking back, that's crazy. So it is important to educate yourself. It is important to spend some time thinking about this. It's worth really, really taking the time to make a plan. Think about what you might want to do and start as soon as you get that first job that you're in and you're doing work and you're getting paid and there's an option to start saving for retirement. And you don't say no, say yes. It doesn't matter how much, start with something. And as I said earlier, just set it and forget it. But really try to educate yourself as much as you can, because I really didn't. And thankfully I've made up for it along the way, and I've learned a lot from different jobs I've had and people saying to me, what are you doing? You need to be thinking about these things, which is important. So don't just not, remain uneducated.
Excellent. Oh, that resonates with me, because my first job, I was 17. I worked at a grocery store and I was there for 5 years. And I remember they started putting flyers up by the time clock about 401ks. And I was just like,
Right.
This is just a part-time job. I'm in school. And now I think, if I had capitalized on that, like that would have just been building now for a couple decades. And it's just a shame because it's money lost.
Exactly.
And I didn't start actively saving for retirement until my 20s, and then took a big gap in employment as a military spouse, which unfortunately is going to affect my later retirement. But now I do what I can to stash as much away as possible, especially if I get like a windfall or something like a stimulus or a tax refund. Anytime I get some large lump sum, I just pop it right in retirement and say, I'll see you later.
That's very
So now I would like to ask for our audience who's watching, and our audience is made up of active duty military spouses, veterans, and I'm wondering, what piece of advice would you give the military community specifically about retirement? And I'll go ahead and I'll jump back in with you, Susan.
Sure. Well, the military community, I want to say we as a country should be and are forever grateful. I mean, these are the people who put their lives on the line every day, and it means a lot to me. And it's very important for all of us. So I personally think it's very important for this community to have financial security, because they give us security in so many other ways. So one of the things I think they should think about taking advantage of is free financial counseling. It's available, it's free. Like, what more could you want? So again, it's something that's on the table. It's going to take time. I know lives are busy. I get it. You have kids, you have work, you have all these other things going on in life, especially now with COVID, but maybe now is the time, like you're stuck at home or you take that time, take advantage of that free financial counseling and get a plan and make a plan and stick to it. So that would be my advice.
Wonderful. And we do actually, if you're active duty military, you can go to your installation and you can receive this. But for anybody else, we do have a partnership with the Yellow Ribbon Network, and they do offer free financial counseling and coaching. So Absolutely. Take advantage of it. It's going to be so valuable in the long run. So, Arlene, what advice would you give to the military community when it comes to retirement?
Well, and thank you for your service. I think that, again, thinking about retiring is one of the most important things anybody can do. And I think that it's never too late to start. So I think that's something I always talk to people about, that if you feel you've missed your point in time, that's not necessarily so. It's better to at least start, because once you start doing it, it becomes more of a routine and you can reach a goal or set goals or change goals. Because as I've come to say, retirement looks a lot different over, as the years go on, and you have to start to really think about what is it going to look like? Where do you want to live? What do you want to do? And I think that as you go through your work years for the military, you're exposed to various people, you're exposed to various places, and you have that opportunity to make up money as well and time, and well as get educated. So that's what I would urge.
That's good. And you bring up another good point as well, because in the military, you move where the military tells you to, unless you get duty station of choice every once in a while. But when you're out, you get to pick. You get to pick where your forever home is going to be, and they're all going to come with different expenses and different costs of living. So that's something to take advantage of as well. So, Doug, last but not least, what would be your piece of advice to the military community in retirement?
Well, take it one service obligation at a time, and do not be afraid to move to the reserves or the guard or even go total civilian. You can reach financial independence in a 20-year military career. The math is there, and it's a matter of paying attention to the numbers and making that your goal. But even if you retire with a military pension, you might still decide to go back to work and do something that you really enjoy, that's challenging and fulfilling. Maybe you'll even get paid some money for it. And so have a plan, not just to get out of the military and run away as fast as you can, which is, I completely understand that perspective, but also think about what your life is going to look like when you're finished with the military. And when you start thinking about what older you is going to want to be interested in doing and how you're going to want to live your life, and thinking down the road 10, even 20 years, that's the time to start getting ready for it and to put together that plan for your exit from the military.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. I now feel inspired to go check out my accounts and make sure that I'm putting away enough for tomorrow, because it will be here before you know it. One day you will stop working. I know some days it feels like you won't, but you will, and you definitely want to be in control and have that retirement of your dreams. So thank you so much for joining us, to our fabulous audience, to our wonderful guests, Doug, Susan, and Arlene. We really appreciate your wealth of information. And remember, for those of you watching, please comment your favorite takeaway below, and you can be entered to win a $50 gift card from Military Families Magazine. So thank you all so much. It's been wonderful talking with you today.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day.